You have until noon tomorrow. Emily, can you hear me? Emily Carter pressed her phone tighter against her ear. The lunchtime crowd at the diner barely noticed her. A baseball game murmured from the television above the counter. Plates clattered in the kitchen. Someone laughed loudly near the window. The espresso machine hissed like it was angry at the world. I can hear you, she whispered. Who is this? My name is Richard Collins. I'm attorney Daniel Foster's legal representative. We briefly met outside the courthouse this morning. Emily felt every muscle in her body tighten. I'll explain this one last time, the man continued in a calm, practiced voice. The family court is concerned that you don't have a permanent residence. I have somewhere to live. She answered too quickly. My daughter and I are staying with a friend. A friend, he repeated, emphasizing the word as though it were already evidence against her. Is your name on the lease? Emily said nothing. Do you have a rental agreement? Utility bills? Mail addressed there? A notarized statement from the homeowner? Silence. Mrs. Carter, he continued, from the court's perspective, your daughter doesn't have a stable home. That's not true. Her voice cracked. Lily is with me every single day. I take her to preschool. She has clothes, toys, her own bedtime routine. Those are emotional arguments. His tone never changed. The court requires documentation. Emily stared across the diner. The waitresses were joking with a regular customer. The cook shouted an order through the kitchen window. Life continued as if nothing had happened. Nobody noticed her fingers shaking. Daniel has everything the judge wants, Richard said. A house in Montclair. Employment records. Tax returns. A furnished bedroom prepared for Lily. Character references. Financial stability. Emily swallowed hard. What exactly do you want? She already knew. Richard paused for just long enough to make the silence hurt. By noon tomorrow, he finally said, you must demonstrate that your daughter is living in a stable family environment. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. What does that even mean? It means, he answered carefully, that you're currently a single mother with no permanent address and no documented household. I'm not a criminal. No one said you were. I just... She stopped herself. I've been trying. I understand. His voice suggested the opposite. But courts evaluate evidence, not effort. Emily closed her eyes. The room suddenly felt too small. If you fail to provide proof of stable living arrangements by tomorrow, Richard continued, the judge is very likely to grant temporary primary custody to Mr. Foster. Her knees almost gave out. That's blackmail. No. A pause. It's reality. His next sentence was even colder. And Daniel asked me to pass along one more message. Emily gripped the edge of the counter. If you create unnecessary drama, contact the media, or attempt to interfere with tomorrow's proceedings, he will immediately file an emergency motion requesting exclusive custody. For several seconds she couldn't breathe. The entire diner seemed to disappear behind a loud ringing in her ears. She forced the words out. I understand. Good. The call ended. Emily kept holding the phone against her ear, almost expecting him to call back and admit it had all been some cruel misunderstanding. Nothing. Only silence. Slowly she lowered the phone onto the counter as if it might explode. Emily? Her coworker Jenny waved from across the dining room. Table 7's asking for the check. Emily nodded automatically. She took one step. Then another. Halfway across the room her lungs refused to work. She couldn't inhale. The air felt thick. Heavy. Without saying a word, she turned around and hurried through the kitchen toward the storage room. The door clicked shut behind her. Inside, it was cramped. Boxes of paper napkins. Cleaning supplies. Cases of canned tomatoes. A flickering fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Emily leaned against a metal shelf and finally exhaled. The breath came out shaking. Then another. And another. The tears she'd been holding back since the courthouse burst free all at once. Oh God. She wasn't really praying. She was talking into the emptiness. I need. She covered her mouth. But the words escaped anyway. I need a husband. She laughed once. A broken laugh. I need a real address. Another sob. Even if it's only on paper. She slid slowly to the floor. If I don't. Her voice disappeared. They're going to take Lily away. Hearing the sentence out loud made it sound impossible. Ridiculous. A grown woman. Begging for a husband because a judge preferred paperwork over love. Outside, dishes clinked. Someone laughed again. Life continued. Then she heard footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Confident. They stopped directly outside the storage room. Emily wiped her face with her sleeve as quickly as she could. The door opened. A man stood in the doorway. He wore a dark construction jacket still wet from the rain. Drops of water slid from his sleeves onto the concrete floor. He looked like someone who had spent the entire morning working outside. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I wasn't trying to listen. Emily immediately stood. This area is for employees. I know. He raised both hands slightly. Not in surrender. More like someone trying to prove he wasn't dangerous. I only heard the last part. She stared at him. I shouldn't even be here. My name is Michael Bennett. There was an awkward pause before he continued. I have a 6-year-old daughter. Emily said nothing. Her heartbeat filled the room. Michael looked toward the floor for a second before meeting her eyes again. I know this is going to sound insane. He hesitated. But if all you need is a home. He took a slow breath. I think I can help. Emily froze. Every instinct she had screamed that strangers didn't make offers like this. Not in real life. Not without wanting something in return. She looked directly into his eyes. Trying to decide whether she was looking at the answer to her prayers. Or the beginning of her worst nightmare. Emily didn't answer immediately. She kept staring at the stranger standing in the doorway, trying to decide whether she should call for help or simply walk away. You don't even know me, she finally said. Michael nodded. You're right. So why would you help? Because I know what it feels like. His voice remained calm. To be terrified of losing your child. Emily crossed her arms. People don't just offer complete strangers a place to live. No. They usually don't. Then what's the catch? There isn't one. She almost laughed. There is always a catch. Michael leaned lightly against the doorframe. I'm not asking you for money. I'm not asking for a relationship. And I'm definitely not asking you to trust me. Emily studied him carefully. He looked exhausted. His work boots were covered in dried concrete. There was fresh sawdust on one sleeve of his jacket. A silver wedding band was missing, but the pale circle around his finger remained. He noticed her looking. My wife passed away 3 years ago. The words came out simply. No drama. No attempt to gain sympathy. Car accident. Emily's expression softened for only a second before she caught herself. I'm sorry. So was I. Silence settled between them. My daughter, he continued, still asks questions I don't know how to answer. Emily looked toward the floor. Lily does that too. What does she ask? If Daddy still loves her. Michael closed his eyes for a brief moment. My daughter asks whether Mommy remembers her. Neither of them spoke. The storage room suddenly felt much smaller. Finally Michael cleared his throat. I own my house. It's in Maplewood. I've lived there for 8 years. It's fully paid off. I have all the paperwork. Emily frowned. You make it sound like you're selling a house. I'm trying to make this sound practical. He reached slowly into his wallet. Without hesitation, he handed her his driver's license. My address. My full name. Take a picture. She didn't move. He removed another card. His contractor's license. Then a business card. Michael Bennett Construction. Licensed. Insured. Phone number. Office address. Check everything. Emily looked from the cards to his face. You expect me to believe all this? No. I expect you to verify it. He placed his wallet on a shelf beside them. If you have someone you trust, call them. Run my license plate. Google my company. Search court records. I'd do exactly the same thing. Emily hesitated. Every warning she'd ever heard about strangers echoed inside her head. But another voice was louder. By noon tomorrow. She slowly picked up his driver's license. The address was real. The expiration date was current. Nothing looked fake. Still, fake IDs existed. She raised her phone and photographed everything. License. Business card. Contractor certification. Michael simply stood there. Not rushing her. Not offended. Not impatient. Emily stepped outside into the rain. His pickup truck sat near the employee parking lot. A white Ford F-150. The company logo matched the business card. She photographed the license plate. Then quickly texted everything to her best friend, Rachel. If anything happens to me, call the police immediately. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. What is going on? Emily typed back. Long story. I'll explain later. Just save everything. She slipped the phone into her pocket and walked back inside. Michael was waiting exactly where she'd left him. So? He asked. Emily looked directly at him. If I even consider this. I have rules. He nodded once. I'm listening. First. My daughter never hears us pretending. No fake marriage. No fake family. No lies. If she asks questions, we tell the truth. Michael answered immediately. Agreed. Second. The moment I feel uncomfortable, we leave. No arguments. No guilt. You drive away. Agreed. Third. I'm following you in my own car. I need to know I can leave whenever I want. A small smile crossed his face. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Emily narrowed her eyes. You smile a lot for someone making a crazy offer. He shrugged. I build houses. Problems usually have solutions. This one just happens to be unusual. She wasn't sure whether that answer comforted her or made things worse. 15 minutes later, Emily buckled Lily into the back seat of her aging Honda Civic. The little girl looked up from her coloring book. Mom? Where are we going? Emily forced a smile. We're helping a friend tonight. Lily accepted the answer without another question. Children often trusted the people they loved far more easily than adults ever could. Rain covered the windshield as Emily followed Michael's truck through the streets of northern New Jersey. Traffic crawled along Springfield Avenue. Streetlights reflected on the wet pavement. Every red light gave her another chance to turn around. Every green light carried her farther from the life she knew. Her phone buzzed. Rachel. I checked him. Another message appeared. Construction company is real. Then another. No criminal record that I can find. Another. Still, be careful. Emily gripped the steering wheel tighter. I know, she whispered. 20 minutes later they turned onto a quiet residential street lined with old maple trees. Michael pulled into the driveway of a 2-story colonial house. It wasn't luxurious. But it looked lived in. A basketball hoop leaned over the driveway. A pink scooter rested near the garage. Someone had forgotten rain boots on the porch. Real life. Not a picture from a real estate listing. Michael climbed out first. Emily stayed in the car. She watched him unlock the front door. He didn't look back. He didn't wave impatiently. He simply waited. As if the next decision belonged entirely to her. After almost a full minute, Emily opened her door. She took Lily's hand. Together, they walked toward the house. Neither of them realized that someone was watching from across the street. A black SUV sat quietly beneath an oak tree. Inside, a man lifted his phone. He zoomed in on Emily. On Lily. On Michael standing in the doorway. Then he quietly pressed record. Emily hesitated at the front door. Everything inside her was telling her to turn around. Take Lily. Drive away. Figure something else out. But every other option led back to the same place. Tomorrow. Family court. Judge Harrison. Daniel. Michael stepped aside without saying a word. After you. Emily entered slowly. The house smelled like fresh coffee, laundry detergent, and sawdust. It wasn't spotless. It was lived in. A backpack lay beside the stairs. A pair of tiny sneakers rested near the front door. Someone had forgotten a stuffed rabbit on the couch. There were signs of life everywhere. Not staged. Real. I warned you, Michael said with an embarrassed smile. I'm a better carpenter than housekeeper. Emily couldn't help noticing something else. Family photos. Most of them featured Michael and a little girl with curly brown hair. But several older pictures included a smiling woman. His wife. The frames hadn't been taken down. He hadn't erased her. That mattered. Daddy? A small voice echoed from upstairs. Michael looked toward the staircase. I'm in the kitchen, sweetheart. Tiny footsteps rushed across the second floor. Seconds later, a little girl appeared at the top of the stairs. She stopped immediately when she saw strangers. Daddy. She whispered. Who's that? Michael knelt so they were eye level. This is Emily. And that's Lily. They're going to stay with us for a little while. The little girl looked from Michael to Emily. Then to Lily. Hi. Lily smiled first. Hi. My name's Lily. I'm Sophie. Neither girl moved for several awkward seconds. Emily held her breath. Children usually sense tension before adults admitted it existed. Then Sophie noticed the stuffed unicorn sticking out of Lily's backpack. Her eyes lit up. Is that Sparkles? Lily blinked. You know Sparkles? I have one too. Without another word, Sophie disappeared upstairs. 30 seconds later she returned carrying an identical unicorn. The girls stared at each other. Then burst into laughter. Emily exchanged a surprised glance with Michael. Neither of them had expected the ice to melt so quickly. Can we play? Sophie asked. Michael looked at Emily. Only after Emily nodded did he answer. Sure. Within moments the girls disappeared into the living room, already arguing over which unicorn had the prettier rainbow mane. Emily listened. Real laughter. Not forced. Not nervous. For the first time all day. Lily sounded like a child again. Michael quietly walked into the kitchen. You want coffee? Emily followed him. I probably shouldn't. I probably shouldn't either. He poured 2 cups anyway. They stood in silence. Neither knew what to say. Finally Emily broke it. Why did your wife? She stopped herself. You don't have to answer. Michael stirred his coffee slowly. Drunk driver. He didn't look up. Wrong lane. It happened on a Friday. He gave a sad smile. I still hate Fridays. Emily swallowed. I'm sorry. So am I. Another silence. Then she asked the question that had been bothering her since the diner. Why me? Michael looked through the kitchen window. Rain tapped softly against the glass. 3 years ago. My daughter and I spent 6 months fighting over paperwork. Emily frowned. What paperwork? Insurance. Custody. The house. Probate. He laughed bitterly. Everyone kept saying they understood. But nobody actually helped. He looked at her. One woman did. Emily waited. I didn't even know her. She spent 2 days driving me between offices because I couldn't leave Sophie alone. What happened to her? I don't know. I never saw her again. He shrugged. Sometimes people show up exactly once. And that's enough to change everything. Emily looked down at her coffee. Maybe. Or maybe some people were simply too good for this world. Her phone buzzed. Rachel. Emily answered immediately. Please tell me you're okay. I'm okay. Where are you exactly? Emily gave her the address. Rachel was quiet. I checked the property records. Emily's stomach tightened. And? He owns the house. No mortgage. No liens. Everything Michael had told her was true. So what's wrong? Rachel lowered her voice. I found something strange. Emily glanced toward the living room. The girls were laughing again. What? I can't prove it. But Daniel hired a private investigator last month. Emily felt cold. What? He filed paperwork requesting surveillance related to the custody hearing. Her heart skipped. You think we're being watched? I think you should assume you are. Emily slowly walked toward the front window. Outside. The rain had almost stopped. Across the street. A black SUV sat beneath an old oak tree. Its windows were dark. Too dark. As if someone inside didn't want to be seen. She stared for several seconds. Then. The engine started. The SUV pulled away. Slowly. Without turning on its headlights until it reached the end of the block. Emily whispered into the phone. I think you're right. She ended the call. When she turned around. Michael was standing behind her. You saw it too. It wasn't a question. Emily nodded. I think Daniel already knows I'm here. Michael looked toward the empty street. Then back at Emily. His expression changed. The relaxed contractor disappeared. In his place stood a father. One who suddenly realized this wasn't just about helping someone anymore. Someone had already made the first move. Neither of them spoke for nearly a minute. Michael slowly locked the front door. Not because he thought someone was about to break in. Because something about that black SUV felt deliberate. Emily wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. You really think Daniel hired someone? Michael looked through the front window one last time before pulling the curtains halfway closed. I don't know. But if he did, then every move we make matters. Emily rubbed her forehead. I never imagined my life turning into something like this. Michael gave a small, tired smile. Neither did I. From the living room came another burst of laughter. The girls had already forgotten the awkward introductions. Sophie and Lily were building a castle out of couch cushions, arguing over whether unicorns or dragons should guard the front gate. Children had an incredible ability to create normality in the middle of chaos. Emily envied them. Michael looked toward the living room. They're getting along better than we are. Emily couldn't help smiling. For now. For now. That evening they sat around the dinner table. Nothing fancy. Spaghetti. Garlic bread. Store-bought salad. The conversation stayed mostly between the girls. Lily, do you like cartoons? Sophie asked. I love them. Me too. What's your favorite? The Bluey Marathon. No way. It's mine too. Emily and Michael exchanged another glance. Neither had expected this. Children usually needed days to warm up to strangers. These two had needed less than an hour. Halfway through dinner, Lily suddenly looked at Michael. Mr. Bennett? Michael smiled. You can call me Michael. She nodded. Okay. Michael. Do you know how to fix bicycles? Emily froze. Michael looked surprised. I know a little. My bike keeps making a funny sound. What kind of sound? Lily imitated the squeaky chain so dramatically that Sophie nearly choked laughing. Michael laughed too. We'll take a look tomorrow. Lily smiled. A real smile. Emily hadn't seen one like that in weeks. For a brief moment, Everything felt almost normal. Later that night, after the girls had fallen asleep in Sophie's room surrounded by stuffed animals and blankets, Emily stood quietly in the hallway. She listened. Soft breathing. Occasional giggles in their sleep. Nothing else. Michael joined her. They'll probably be exhausted tomorrow. Emily nodded. I can't remember the last time Lily fell asleep without asking if I was still awake. Michael leaned against the wall. Sophie used to do that. What changed? He looked toward the closed bedroom door. She finally believed I wasn't going anywhere. Emily lowered her eyes. I wish Lily felt that way. Michael didn't answer immediately. Then he quietly asked. What really happened between you and Daniel? Emily laughed bitterly. The short version? I thought I married the man I loved. She folded her arms. The long version. He loved winning. Michael stayed silent. She appreciated that. He wasn't violent. She added the words before Michael could wonder. He was controlling. If dinner wasn't ready, I was irresponsible. If Lily got sick, I was careless. If I disagreed with him, I was emotional. She looked out the hallway window. And somehow, after enough years, you start wondering if maybe he's right. Michael nodded slowly. I know that feeling. Emily looked surprised. You do? My wife didn't make me feel that way. He smiled sadly. The insurance company did. Emily laughed despite herself. He grinned. I spent 6 months being told that everything I submitted was incomplete. I started wondering if I had forgotten how to fill out forms. They both laughed quietly. The tension eased. Just a little. At exactly 10:47 p.m., someone's phone buzzed. Not Emily's. Not Michael's. The house phone. A landline. Michael frowned. Nobody calls that number. He answered. Hello? Silence. Only breathing. Slow. Deliberate. Michael's expression hardened. Who is this? Nothing. Then. A man's voice. Low. Almost amused. Nice house. Click. The line went dead. Emily stared at him. What? Michael slowly lowered the receiver. He said. Nice house. The color drained from Emily's face. They know. Neither of them had to explain who they were. Michael immediately checked every door and every window. Locked. He stepped onto the front porch. The neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. A porch light flickered across the street. Nothing unusual. Except. Near the mailbox. Fresh tire tracks cut through the wet grass. Someone had pulled off the road. Someone had stopped. Someone had watched. Michael returned inside. We're calling the police, Emily whispered. Michael shook his head. And tell them what? Someone breathed into a phone. They'll write a report. That's all. Emily hated that he was probably right. Just after midnight, neither of them could sleep. Emily sat at the kitchen table scrolling through court documents on her phone. Michael worked quietly beside her. Mortgage records. Property tax receipts. School enrollment papers. Medical insurance. Everything the judge might ask for. The dining table slowly disappeared beneath stacks of folders. This feels ridiculous, Emily muttered. Michael looked up. What does? Trying to prove we're good people with paperwork. He smiled faintly. The court can't measure love. So it measures documents. Emily sighed. I hate that. So do I. Before either of them could say another word. A bright light swept across the front windows. Headlights. Both of them froze. The light disappeared. Then came the unmistakable sound of a vehicle stopping outside. A car door opened. Footsteps approached the porch. 3 slow knocks echoed through the house. Knock. 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 Michael looked at Emily. She looked back at him. Neither moved. Then a familiar voice came from outside. Emily? It was Rachel. She sounded out of breath. You need to open the door. Emily hurried forward. What happened? Rachel's face was pale. She held her phone in one shaking hand. I think Daniel just crossed a line. Emily unlocked the front door so quickly that Rachel barely had time to knock again. The moment she stepped inside, Rachel held up her phone. You need to see this. Emily took it with trembling hands. On the screen was a photo. Not a random one. It was taken only a few hours earlier. Michael standing on the front porch. Emily getting Lily out of the car. The girls walking into the house together. Every angle looked professional. Someone hadn't simply been watching. Someone had been documenting everything. Where did you get this? Emily asked. Rachel swallowed. A friend of mine works at a print shop in Newark. He recognized Daniel's investigator. Emily looked confused. What do you mean? They're preparing exhibits. Michael stepped closer. For court? Rachel nodded. Not tomorrow. The final hearing. She zoomed in on another image. This one was worse. Emily was standing beside Michael in the driveway. From the angle, it looked intimate. As if they were embracing. In reality, Michael had simply handed her Lily's backpack. They're trying to make it look like we've been living together for months, Emily whispered. Rachel nodded again. And if Daniel convinces the judge that you lied under oath. Emily finished the sentence herself. I lose all credibility. Silence filled the kitchen. Michael finally spoke. So tomorrow isn't really about proving Emily has a stable home. Rachel looked at him. No. It's about catching her in a lie. Michael slowly sat down. He stared at the photographs spread across the table. They're building a story. Rachel nodded. And stories are powerful. Emily rubbed her temples. I haven't lied. Not yet. Rachel answered carefully. But if tomorrow anyone asks when you moved here, they'll compare your answer with these timestamps. Emily looked at Michael. What do we do? Michael thought for several seconds. Then he smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the expression of someone who had just solved a difficult construction problem. We tell the truth. Rachel frowned. That could destroy your case. No. Michael shook his head. It could save it. Both women looked at him. We never say we've lived together for months. We tell the judge exactly what happened. Emily stared. You think he'll believe us? I don't know. But judges hear rehearsed lies every day. They don't hear uncomfortable truths very often. The kitchen fell silent again. Then Lily's small voice drifted down the hallway. Mom? Emily hurried toward the bedroom. Lily stood in the doorway rubbing one eye. I had a bad dream. Emily knelt immediately. What happened? I dreamed Daddy took me away. Emily's heart broke. She wrapped her daughter in her arms. I'm right here. Lily held on tighter. Promise? I promise. From across the hallway, Sophie quietly appeared. She carried her stuffed unicorn. Lily. She whispered. You can sleep with Sparkles. Lily looked up. But that's yours. Sophie shrugged. You look like you need her more. Emily blinked away tears. Children. Somehow always understood what adults struggled to say. The next morning began before sunrise. Emily hadn't slept. Neither had Michael. By 6 o'clock the kitchen table was covered with organized folders. Tax returns. Property records. Utility bills. Employment verification. School enrollment. Medical insurance. Everything that proved this house was stable. Everything except the one thing that mattered most. Time. Emily looked at the clock. 7:12 a.m. 5 hours until court. Michael buttoned a clean navy blue shirt. Emily had only seen him in work clothes. He looked different. Still the same man. Just carrying a heavier responsibility. "You clean up well," she said. He laughed. "My daughter says I look uncomfortable in anything without sawdust." As if on cue, Sophie entered the kitchen. She stopped. "Daddy. You look weird." Michael burst into laughter. "Told you." Even Emily laughed. The tension eased for only a moment. At breakfast, the girls talked non-stop. Neither seemed to understand how much depended on the next few hours. "Can Lily come back tomorrow?" Sophie asked. Michael looked toward Emily. "We'll see." Lily frowned. "I don't want to leave." Emily froze. Neither adult knew how to answer. Finally Michael smiled gently. "Let's get through today first." Lily nodded. Satisfied. Children measured time differently. Tomorrow still felt forever away. At 8:30 a.m., there was another knock at the door. Everyone looked up. Michael opened it cautiously. A woman in a navy blazer stood on the porch holding an identification badge. "Good morning. My name is Karen Mitchell. I'm with Essex County Child Protective Services." Emily's stomach dropped. So soon? Karen offered a polite smile. The court requested an unannounced home visit. Emily and Michael exchanged a quick glance. This was happening now. Not next week. Not after the hearing. Now. Karen stepped inside. She looked around quietly. No judgment. No expression. Just observation. She noticed the family photos. The children's backpacks. The breakfast dishes still sitting on the table. She smiled slightly. "Looks like I caught real life." No one laughed. Karen turned toward the hallway. "Would it be all right if I spoke with the girls?" Emily hesitated. Michael gently nodded. "They're in the playroom." Karen disappeared down the hall. The adults remained in the kitchen. Nobody spoke. Every second felt longer than the last. Then, from the playroom, they heard laughter. Followed by Karen asking softly, "So, who fixed the bicycle outside?" Emily smiled despite herself. She already knew exactly what Lily's answer would be. And for the first time since all of this had begun, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in days. Hope. Karen Mitchell remained in the playroom for nearly 20 minutes. To Emily, it felt like 2 hours. Every laugh she heard from behind the closed door made her wonder what question had been asked. Every pause made her heart race. Michael quietly poured himself another cup of coffee but never drank it. Rachel had already left for work, promising to keep checking anything connected to Daniel's legal team. Now the house felt strangely silent. Finally, the playroom door opened. Karen stepped into the hallway with a small notebook in her hand. She wasn't smiling. But she wasn't frowning either. Professional. Measured. "The girls are wonderful," she said. Emily searched her face for any clue. "What did they tell you?" Karen closed her notebook. "They answered exactly the way children usually do." Emily's stomach tightened. "And what does that mean?" Karen looked at her kindly. "It means they talked about pancakes. And cartoons. And a bicycle." Emily blinked. Karen continued. "They didn't sound coached. They sounded safe." Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Karen turned toward Michael. "May I see Lily's room?" Emily froze. "Room?" Michael answered calmly. "Of course." He led Karen upstairs. Emily followed several steps behind. The bedroom wasn't fancy. One side belonged to Sophie. The other had been quickly prepared the night before. Fresh sheets. A small dresser. Lily's backpack. Her favorite blanket. Karen carefully looked around. She opened the closet. Checked the smoke detector. Looked beneath the bed. Then she noticed something taped to the wall. A crayon drawing. 2 unicorns. 2 little girls holding hands. Above them, in large uneven letters, someone had written, "Best friends." Karen smiled. When was this made? Michael answered honestly. This morning. Karen looked back at the drawing. I believe it. Children rarely fake joy. Downstairs, Karen placed her notebook into her leather bag. I'll submit my observations to the judge before this afternoon. Emily's pulse quickened. Can you tell us anything? Karen hesitated. I shouldn't. Another pause. But I can tell you one thing. Both Emily and Michael waited. The court isn't looking for perfection. It's looking for stability. She glanced around the home one last time. This house feels lived in. It feels calm. And your daughters. She corrected herself. The girls. They seemed genuinely happy together. Emily felt tears burning behind her eyes. Thank you. Karen nodded politely. I'll see you at the courthouse. Then she left. The front door closed. Nobody moved. Finally Michael let out a long breath. I think that went well. Emily laughed nervously. I've forgotten what well feels like. Her phone buzzed. Rachel. Emily answered immediately. Tell me something good. Rachel didn't. I found Daniel's investigator. Emily's heart sank. What now? He uploaded new photographs to the legal portal this morning. Michael stepped closer so he could hear. Rachel continued. There's also security camera footage. Emily frowned. From where? The diner. Emily felt cold all over. The diner? Rachel sighed. Daniel subpoenaed the surveillance footage from the day you met Michael. Emily looked at Michael. Neither of them spoke. Rachel continued. If the footage only shows the end of your conversation, it could look like the two of you planned this. Emily closed her eyes. They're twisting everything. I know. Rachel's voice softened. But listen carefully. I watched the timestamps. Emily opened her eyes. And? The footage starts before Michael walks into the storage room. Michael looked up. So? Rachel almost sounded excited. So it also shows Emily breaking down alone. And? It shows Michael entering only after hearing her cry. Silence. Michael finally smiled. They asked for the video. And accidentally requested the truth. An hour later, Emily, Michael, Lily, and Sophie stood in the driveway. Michael adjusted Lily's bicycle chain. There. Try now. Lily climbed onto the bike. She pushed the pedals. No squeak. No grinding noise. It rolled perfectly. It works. She shouted. She circled the driveway twice before stopping. You really can fix anything. Michael laughed. Not everything. Emily quietly watched them. A strange feeling settled inside her. She hadn't asked Michael to become part of Lily's life. Yet somehow, he already was. Not replacing anyone. Simply showing up. Again and again. Without expecting applause. Without asking for credit. Just before they left for court, Michael locked the front door. He reached into his pocket for the car keys. Then stopped. Something white was tucked beneath the windshield wiper of his truck. An envelope. No stamp. No address. Only one word written across the front. Michael. Emily's heartbeat quickened. Michael slowly opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. No signature. Just one sentence. Walk away now, or you'll lose your daughter too. Neither of them spoke. The morning suddenly felt much colder. Michael folded the paper carefully. Then looked straight at Emily. They're scared. Emily frowned. What? They wouldn't threaten me. If they thought they were already winning. For the first time since this nightmare had begun. Emily saw something different in Michael's eyes. Not fear. Determination. He opened the passenger door for her. Come on. It's time to tell the truth. As they drove toward the Essex County Courthouse, none of them noticed. A familiar black SUV quietly pulled out behind them, keeping just enough distance. Never getting too close. Never falling too far behind. The final battle had already begun. The drive to the Essex County Courthouse felt much longer than it actually was. No one talked. Rain clouds still hung low over northern New Jersey, turning the morning gray despite the late hour. Emily sat in the passenger seat, staring through the windshield. The anonymous note rested in her lap. Walk away now, or you'll lose your daughter too. She had read it at least 20 times. Each time it felt more personal. More threatening. Michael finally broke the silence. We're not showing that note to Daniel. Emily looked at him. Why not? Because that's exactly what whoever wrote it wants. She frowned. You don't think he sent it? Michael kept his eyes on the road. I honestly don't know. If Daniel sent it, then he wants us scared. If someone else sent it, they want exactly the same thing. Emily slowly folded the paper. So either way, we don't let them see it worked. Michael nodded. Exactly. The courthouse parking lot was already crowded. Lawyers hurried across the wet pavement carrying leather briefcases. Families stood under umbrellas. Some looked angry. Others terrified. Emily realized something. Every person walking through those doors believed they were fighting for something that mattered. Today. So was she. As they approached the entrance, Michael quietly touched her arm. Emily stopped. What? He looked directly into her eyes. No matter what happens in there, you don't apologize for being Lily's mother. The words hit her harder than she expected. For years, she had apologized. To Daniel. To employers. To landlords. To neighbors. To teachers. For being late. For missing work. For asking questions. For struggling. For existing. She gave a small nod. I won't. Inside the courthouse, security checked everyone's bags. The metal detector beeped constantly as people passed through. Emily recognized the hallway immediately. Cold marble floors. White walls. Rows of uncomfortable benches. It looked exactly like every courthouse she'd ever seen in movies. Except this wasn't a movie. This was her life. Rachel was already waiting. She hurried toward them. I have good news. Emily almost laughed. I haven't heard those words in weeks. Rachel handed over a folder. I subpoenaed copies of the surveillance footage before Daniel's team could edit their presentation. Michael smiled. Can they still use it? They can. Rachel answered. But now so can we. Emily looked at the folder. For the first time, it felt like the truth might actually have evidence. Across the hallway, Daniel Foster appeared. Perfectly tailored navy suit. Polished shoes. Not a single hair out of place. His attorney, Richard Collins, walked beside him carrying 2 thick binders. Daniel smiled the moment he saw Emily. Not warmly. Confidently. As expected. Emily felt Michael step beside her. Not in front of her. Beside her. Daniel looked him up and down. So. You're the contractor. Michael answered calmly. And you're Lily's father. Daniel ignored the comment. I hope you understand what you've involved yourself in. Michael didn't blink. I do. Daniel gave a short laugh. I don't think you do. He stepped closer. This woman is desperate. Today she'll say anything. And tomorrow. He shrugged. She'll disappear. Emily opened her mouth. Michael gently touched her arm. Not yet. Daniel noticed. He smiled again. You know what her biggest mistake was? He looked directly at Michael. Thinking someone like you could fix this. Michael finally answered. No. He spoke quietly enough that Daniel had to lean in. Her biggest mistake was believing you loved your daughter more than you loved winning. Daniel's smile disappeared. For the first time, Emily saw something she had never seen before. Daniel had no response. A court clerk stepped into the hallway. Foster custody hearing. We're ready. Everyone entered the courtroom. Judge Eleanor Harrison was already seated. She adjusted her glasses and reviewed several folders before looking up. Good morning. Her voice was calm but firm. Let's begin. Emily sat beside Michael. Rachel occupied the row behind them. Daniel and Richard settled at the opposite table. Judge Harrison looked around the room. I understand new information has been submitted by both parties. Richard stood first. Yes, Your Honor. He walked confidently toward the evidence table. We intend to demonstrate that the respondent knowingly attempted to create the appearance of a stable household immediately before today's hearing. Emily felt her pulse quicken. The judge nodded. Proceed. Richard pressed a button. A large monitor lit up. The first photograph appeared. Emily standing beside Michael's truck. Then another. The girls entering the house. Another. Michael opening the front door. Each image had a date and timestamp. Richard faced the judge. As the court can see, this alleged family environment was created less than 24 hours ago. He turned toward Emily. Mrs. Carter. When exactly did you move into Mr. Bennett's home? The courtroom fell silent. Emily knew this was the trap. If she lied, the timestamps would expose her. If she admitted the truth, Daniel would claim everything was staged. Judge Harrison looked directly at her. You may answer. Emily slowly stood. Her hands trembled. But her voice did not. I moved into Mr. Bennett's home yesterday afternoon. Richard smiled immediately. So you admit this arrangement exists only because of today's hearing? Emily took one slow breath. Then another. She looked at the judge. No. She answered. I admit. That desperation brought me to his front door. The courtroom became so quiet. Even the air conditioning seemed loud. Emily kept her eyes on Judge Harrison. She refused to look at Daniel. Or Richard. Or anyone else in the courtroom. I didn't meet Mr. Bennett because I wanted a relationship, she said. I met him because I thought I was about to lose my daughter. Richard folded his arms. So your entire story is based on coincidence? Emily answered without hesitation. No. It's based on kindness. A faint murmur spread through the courtroom before Judge Harrison raised a hand. Order. Richard approached the witness stand. Mrs. Carter. Do you honestly expect this court to believe that a complete stranger invited you into his home after a single conversation? Emily nodded. I wouldn't have believed it either. Richard smiled. So we're expected to ignore common sense? No. Emily's voice remained steady. I'm asking the court to hear the whole story. Judge Harrison leaned forward slightly. You may continue. Emily took a slow breath. I broke down in the storage room of the diner where I work. I thought no one could hear me. I thought I was completely alone. She paused. Mr. Bennett heard me crying. He didn't interrupt. He didn't make promises. He offered me a choice. She looked toward Michael. I almost said no. I probably should have. Another quiet laugh rippled through the courtroom. Even Judge Harrison's expression softened for just a moment. Emily continued. I photographed his driver's license. His contractor's license. His truck. I sent everything to my best friend. I followed him in my own car. I kept my phone on. I planned every possible escape before I ever walked through his front door. Richard interrupted. But you still accepted help from someone you barely knew. Yes. Why? Emily didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. Because I had run out of people who already knew me. Silence. No one moved. No one coughed. Even Richard hesitated. Judge Harrison quietly wrote something in her notebook. Richard recovered quickly. Your Honor. We would now like to present surveillance footage from Lakeside Diner. He connected a flash drive to the courtroom monitor. The video appeared. Security camera footage. Black and white. A timestamp in the corner. Emily stood behind the counter answering customers. Several minutes passed. Then her phone rang. Everyone watched as she answered. Even without sound. Her expression slowly changed. Confusion. Fear. Panic. She ended the call. Walked several steps. Stopped. Then disappeared into the storage room. The courtroom remained silent. A minute later. Michael appeared. He entered the diner carrying a toolbox. He ordered coffee. Waited. Then looked toward the hallway. He hesitated. Only after nearly 30 seconds did he walk toward the storage room. Judge Harrison watched carefully. Richard frowned. The footage continued. Michael entered. Less than 2 minutes later. Emily rushed outside. She photographed his truck. His license plate. His driver's license. Exactly as she had described. Rachel leaned toward Emily and whispered. They accidentally proved your testimony. Emily squeezed her hand beneath the table. Richard cleared his throat. The footage still shows they met immediately before this arrangement. Judge Harrison looked at him. It also shows no indication of prior contact. Richard hesitated. That is, correct. The judge made another note. Continue. Richard stepped back. The petitioner calls Michael Bennett. Michael walked calmly to the witness stand. He took the oath. Sat down. Richard approached with a folder in his hand. Mr. Bennett. How long have you known Emily Carter? Michael answered honestly. Since yesterday. You expect us to believe that after less than 24 hours. You allowed her and her daughter to move into your home? Yes. Richard raised an eyebrow. Why? Michael looked around the courtroom before answering. Because no one should lose a child over an address. A few people sitting in the gallery quietly nodded. Richard immediately changed direction. You own a construction company? I do. You've experienced financial difficulties? Yes. You've had business debts? Yes. You've been late on tax payments? Yes. Richard turned toward the judge. So Mr. Bennett himself has struggled with financial stability. Michael interrupted calmly. Past tense. Richard ignored him. You also became a single parent after your wife's death. Yes. So would you agree that your own household has experienced instability? Michael smiled faintly. No. Richard frowned. No. My finances became unstable. My family didn't. The courtroom fell silent again. Michael continued. My daughter still had breakfast every morning. She still got hugs before school. She still knew someone would be waiting when she came home. He looked directly at Richard. Money isn't the only kind of stability. Richard said nothing. Judge Harrison looked up from her notes. Mr. Bennett. I have a question. Yes, Your Honor. If this custody case had never existed, would Emily Carter still be living in your home today? The entire courtroom waited. Even Daniel turned to look at him. Michael didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked across the room. At Emily. Then toward Lily, who was quietly coloring in the children's waiting area beside the courtroom officer. Finally he faced the judge. I honestly don't know. Another pause. But I do know one thing. What is that? Michael smiled gently. I'd still open the door. Daniel suddenly stood. Objection, Your Honor. Judge Harrison looked at him. On what grounds? Daniel's jaw tightened. He's turning this into an emotional performance. The judge didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward Michael. Then toward Emily. Finally, she looked down at the stack of evidence. And what she noticed next changed the entire direction of the hearing. Judge Harrison reached for the stack of exhibits one more time. She didn't say anything. She simply separated 2 photographs from the rest. Then she looked toward Richard Collins. Mr. Collins. Could you approach, please? Richard walked to the bench confidently. Judge Harrison handed him both photographs. I have a question. Richard glanced down. His confidence faded almost instantly. The judge spoke calmly. Would you explain why these 2 exhibits contain different timestamps, while showing the exact same image? The courtroom grew silent. Richard blinked twice. There may have been an error when organizing the files. Judge Harrison didn't react. An error? She lifted another page. The metadata attached to these photographs indicates that one timestamp was manually edited yesterday evening. Emily looked toward Rachel. Rachel slowly nodded. She had noticed it too. Daniel's expression hardened. Richard adjusted his tie. Your Honor, the timestamps are not central to our argument. Judge Harrison looked directly at him. They became central the moment your office submitted them as evidence. Daniel suddenly stood. Your Honor, this appears to be nothing more than a clerical mistake. Judge Harrison turned toward him. Mr. Foster. This court takes altered evidence very seriously. Daniel's jaw tightened. We had no intention of misleading anyone. The judge remained expressionless. I sincerely hope that's true. She placed the photographs aside. They will not be considered. Richard quietly returned to his table. For the first time all morning, he avoided looking at Daniel. Rachel leaned closer to Emily. He didn't know. Emily whispered back. What? Richard. He genuinely didn't know the timestamps had been changed. Emily looked across the courtroom. Daniel was staring at the table. Not at the judge. Not at Michael. Not at Emily. At the evidence. Almost as if he were calculating how much damage had just been done. Judge Harrison folded her hands. Mr. Foster. I have several questions. Daniel stood immediately. Of course, Your Honor. You've repeatedly argued that your primary concern is your daughter's stability. Correct. You've also testified that Mrs. Carter cannot provide an appropriate home. Correct. The judge nodded. Very well. She removed another document from the file. I've reviewed Lily's school attendance records. Daniel's face remained neutral. The judge continued. They indicate that during the last 18 months, Mrs. Carter attended every parent-teacher conference. Emily blinked. Every pediatric appointment. Every preschool event. She looked up. Mr. Foster. Can you explain why your name appears on only one school document? Daniel hesitated. My work schedule. Judge Harrison interrupted. I'm asking a simple question. Were you involved? Daniel shifted his weight. I provided financially. The judge nodded once. I'm sure you did. She picked up another folder. This one contains statements from Lily's preschool teachers. Emily recognized the logo immediately. Little Oaks Learning Center. Judge Harrison read aloud. When Lily is frightened, she asks for her mother. Another page. Mrs. Carter consistently communicates with staff regarding Lily's emotional needs. Another. Mr. Foster has visited the school twice. Daniel looked uncomfortable. For the first time. He no longer looked like the man in control. Richard stood again. Your Honor. No one disputes Mrs. Carter loves her daughter. Our concern has always been housing stability. Judge Harrison nodded thoughtfully. I understand. She turned toward Emily. Mrs. Carter. If this court rules in your favor today, what happens next? Emily stood. I'll keep working. I'll save every dollar I can. I'll find a place of my own. Judge Harrison asked another question. And until then? Emily looked briefly toward Michael. Then answered honestly. If he'll still let us stay, we'll remain there. The judge turned to Michael. Mr. Bennett. Would you? Michael didn't hesitate. Yes. For how long? As long as they need. Richard immediately objected. Your Honor, that's impossible to verify. Michael looked at him calmly. It isn't. He reached into his briefcase. I brought something. He handed a folder to the bailiff. The documents were delivered to the judge. She opened them. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. What is this? Michael answered simply. A legal tenancy agreement. Emily's eyes widened. She had never seen it before. Michael continued. My attorney prepared it this morning. It gives Emily Carter and Lily Carter legal residency at my home. No rent. No expiration date. No conditions. Judge Harrison slowly turned each page. Everything was notarized. Signed. Filed correctly. Richard looked stunned. Daniel stared at Michael. You planned this? Michael finally looked directly at him. No. I prepared for my promise to mean something. The courtroom fell completely silent. Even the spectators sitting in the back rows leaned forward. Judge Harrison carefully closed the folder. Then she looked at Michael for several long seconds. Mr. Bennett. May I ask one final question? Of course. She removed her glasses. Why are you doing this? Michael looked down at his rough hands. The same hands that built houses. Fixed bicycles. Worked overtime. The same hands that had opened a front door for a stranger. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost quiet enough to disappear. Because 3 years ago, someone I barely knew saved my daughter. He smiled sadly. I never even learned her last name. He looked toward Emily. I've spent every day since then hoping I'd recognize my chance to do the same. The courtroom fell silent once more. Not because anyone had run out of arguments, but because, for the first time that day, no one could think of anything stronger than the truth. The courtroom remained silent. No one moved. Even Richard Collins lowered his eyes. Judge Harrison slowly placed Michael's tenancy agreement beside the other evidence. She looked across the courtroom one final time. Then she folded her hands. The court will take a 15-minute recess before issuing its decision. The wooden gavel struck once. Everyone stood. Outside the courtroom, the hallway filled with nervous conversations. Emily leaned against the wall. Only now did she realize how exhausted she was. Her legs felt weak. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Michael walked over carrying 2 bottles of water from the vending machine. He handed one to her. You should drink. Emily smiled faintly. I don't think I could swallow anything right now. He unscrewed the cap anyway. You've said that 3 times since yesterday. She accepted the bottle. And somehow you always convince me. Michael shrugged. I have a daughter. I've learned negotiations. Emily laughed quietly. The sound surprised even her. For the first time in nearly 2 days. It wasn't forced. Rachel hurried toward them with her laptop tucked under one arm. I just received something. Emily's smile disappeared. What now? Rachel glanced over both shoulders before lowering her voice. The investigator. What about him? He just uploaded an amended statement. Michael frowned. Amended? Rachel nodded. He removed 2 photographs from his report. Emily blinked. Why? Rachel turned the screen toward them. At the bottom of the document was a short paragraph. Certain exhibits were submitted in error and should not be considered representative of the complete sequence of observed events. Michael smiled. So he's protecting himself. Rachel nodded. He knows someone altered the evidence after he delivered it. Emily looked toward the courtroom doors. So Daniel did it. Rachel hesitated. I can't prove that. But someone inside his team certainly did. Across the hallway, Daniel stood alone near a window. Richard was speaking quietly into his phone several feet away. They weren't standing together anymore. Daniel noticed Emily looking. For a second. Neither of them moved. Then, unexpectedly, Daniel walked toward her. Michael instinctively stepped forward. Daniel stopped several feet away. I'm not here to argue. Emily folded her arms. What do you want? Daniel looked genuinely tired for the first time since this began. I wanted to ask you something. Emily waited. When did you stop trusting me? The question caught her completely off guard. She stared at him. You really don't know? Daniel shook his head. I thought I was protecting Lily. Emily's voice remained calm. No. You were protecting your image. Daniel looked away. I worked hard. I provided. You did. Emily nodded. You paid every bill. You bought every birthday present. You never missed a child support payment. Daniel looked back at her, almost relieved. Exactly. Emily took one step closer. But do you know what Lily wanted after every nightmare? Daniel said nothing. She wanted someone to sit beside her bed. Another silence. Do you know what she asked for when she had the flu? Nothing. Do you know which stuffed animal she refuses to sleep without? Daniel slowly lowered his eyes. Emily's voice softened. You tried to become the perfect father. Without ever learning how to simply be her dad. For several long seconds, Daniel couldn't answer. Finally he spoke. I didn't know. Emily nodded sadly. I know. The courtroom doors opened again. Court is back in session. Everyone returned to their seats. Judge Harrison entered carrying a single folder. She waited until the room became completely quiet. Then she began. This case has never truly been about financial stability. Daniel looked up. It has never been about a perfect home. Emily held her breath. The court's responsibility is to determine what arrangement serves the best interests of the child. She paused. Both parents clearly love Lily. Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly. But love alone does not decide custody. Judge Harrison looked toward Emily. Mrs. Carter demonstrated honesty today. She turned toward Michael. Mr. Bennett demonstrated extraordinary generosity. Then she looked at Daniel. Mr. Foster. You demonstrated careful preparation. A long pause followed. But preparation is not the same thing as parenting. The courtroom became perfectly still. Judge Harrison opened the folder. The court has reached its decision. Emily felt Michael gently squeeze her hand beneath the table. Neither of them noticed. Neither of them let go. Judge Harrison looked directly at Lily, who was quietly drawing with colored pencils beside the court officer. Then back at the adults. In every custody case, I ask myself one simple question. If this child were my own, where would I want her to wake up tomorrow morning? She lowered her eyes to the final page. Then began reading the decision. Judge Harrison looked down at the final page. The courtroom was so quiet that the ticking of the wall clock suddenly seemed deafening. She adjusted her glasses. Then began reading. After reviewing the testimony, the submitted evidence, the home evaluation, the school records, and the credibility of each witness, this court finds that there is insufficient legal basis to modify Lily Carter's primary residence. Emily stopped breathing. Judge Harrison continued. Temporary primary physical custody shall remain with her mother, Emily Carter. Emily closed her eyes. She didn't cry. Not yet. She was almost afraid she'd heard it wrong. The petition requesting an emergency transfer of custody is denied. A quiet murmur spread across the courtroom. Daniel lowered his head. Richard slowly closed his binder. Judge Harrison wasn't finished. This court also finds that several exhibits submitted by the petitioner's legal team require further review due to questions regarding their authenticity. Daniel immediately looked up. Judge Harrison met his eyes. I am making no findings of misconduct today. She paused. But I am referring those materials for independent examination. Richard quietly whispered something to Daniel. Daniel didn't answer. Judge Harrison turned toward Emily. Mrs. Carter. Emily stood. The court recognizes that your housing situation became unstable. Emily nodded. It also recognizes that instead of attempting to deceive the court, you disclosed the truth. Emily felt tears begin to form. Judge Harrison continued. You admitted facts that could have harmed your own case. That matters. She turned another page. The court further notes that every independent witness, including Child Protective Services, described Lily as emotionally secure in her mother's care. Karen Mitchell gave a small respectful nod from the gallery. Judge Harrison smiled slightly. Children rarely fake security. Then the judge looked toward Michael. Mr. Bennett. He stood. I have presided over family cases for nearly 18 years. She folded her hands. In that time, I have heard hundreds of promises. I'll help. I'll support them. I'll be there. She glanced at the tenancy agreement. Very few people arrive with signed documents proving those promises. A few quiet smiles appeared around the courtroom. Judge Harrison continued. You had no legal obligation to become involved. No financial incentive. No personal benefit. Michael simply answered. I know. The judge nodded once. The court appreciates citizens who understand that communities are built by people, not statutes. Michael lowered his head respectfully. Thank you, Your Honor. Judge Harrison looked back toward Daniel. Mr. Foster. Daniel slowly stood. I hope you understand something. He remained silent. This ruling does not make you a bad father. Daniel looked surprised. It means that the court believes your daughter needs both parents. Emily glanced toward Daniel. He was listening. Really listening. Perhaps for the first time in years. Judge Harrison continued. You clearly love your child. But love expressed only through financial support is incomplete. Daniel's eyes slowly filled with emotion. The judge softened her tone. I strongly encourage both parents to begin rebuilding trust. Lily deserves cooperation, not competition. Daniel quietly nodded. I understand. His voice was barely audible. The gavel struck once. This matter is concluded. For a moment, nobody moved. Emily remained standing as if afraid the decision might somehow disappear. Then Lily suddenly jumped from her chair. Mommy. She ran across the courtroom. Emily dropped to her knees just in time to catch her. Lily wrapped both arms around her neck. Does this mean we're going home? Emily could barely speak. Yes. She kissed the top of Lily's head. Yes, sweetheart. We're going home. Lily smiled. Then looked toward Michael. And can Sophie still come over? The entire courtroom laughed. Even Judge Harrison smiled. Michael looked toward Sophie, who was already grinning. I think that can be arranged. People slowly began leaving the courtroom. Karen Mitchell stopped beside Emily. You fought hard. Emily smiled through her tears. So did you. Karen shook her head. No. She looked toward Lily. She did. Karen gently touched Lily's shoulder. Take good care of your mom. I will, Lily answered seriously. Karen smiled and walked away. Across the room, Richard quietly packed his briefcase. He approached Michael before leaving. I owe you an apology. Michael looked surprised. For what? I assumed you were part of a scheme. Richard sighed. I've been practicing family law for 23 years. I've become suspicious of almost everyone. Michael nodded. I understand. Richard looked toward Emily and Lily. I hope I don't lose the ability to recognize good people. Without waiting for a response, he walked away. Only Daniel remained. He stood near the courtroom doors for several seconds before finally walking toward Emily. Michael instinctively stepped aside. This conversation belonged to them. Daniel looked at Lily first. Then at Emily. I'm sorry. Emily searched his face. There was no anger. No pride. Only exhaustion. I thought I was doing what was best. Emily answered quietly. I know. Daniel looked down. I forgot that winning isn't always the same as being right. For the first time since their divorce, neither of them had anything left to prove. Only something left to repair. 3 months later. The maple trees lining Michael's street had turned deep shades of gold and crimson. Autumn had quietly settled over northern New Jersey. The Bennett house looked different now. Not because it had been renovated. Because it felt alive. A small swing hung beneath the old oak tree in the backyard. Fresh flowers sat beside the front porch. Children's chalk drawings covered half the driveway. Someone had written in bright pink letters. Welcome home. Saturday mornings had developed their own rhythm. Michael was in the backyard repairing a fence gate that didn't really need repairing. He simply enjoyed working with his hands. Sophie was helping. Mostly by handing him the wrong tools. Lily sat cross-legged nearby, carefully painting a birdhouse bright yellow. Emily stepped onto the porch carrying 4 mugs of hot chocolate. She stopped for a moment. Just watching them. There was something almost unbelievable about ordinary happiness. For so many years, she had thought peace would arrive with fireworks. Instead, it had arrived quietly. One breakfast at a time. One repaired bicycle. One shared dinner. One bedtime story. You planning to stand there all morning? Michael called with a grin. Emily smiled. I was thinking. Dangerous. It usually is. She walked over and handed him a mug. Their fingers brushed for only a second. Neither pulled away immediately. Sophie noticed first. She looked at Lily. Then whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. I think they're doing that smiling thing again. Lily giggled. The grown-up smiling? The weird one. Michael laughed. We can hear you. I know, Sophie answered proudly. We wanted you to. Everyone burst into laughter. Life wasn't suddenly perfect. Emily was still working at the diner. Michael still spent long days on construction sites. Money was sometimes tight. The dishwasher broke. The roof leaked during one heavy storm. Lily caught the flu. Sophie struggled with math. Real life had never disappeared. But neither had hope. And somehow, hope made ordinary problems feel smaller. One afternoon, Emily returned home to find Lily sitting on the front steps. What are you doing out here? Lily held up a folded piece of paper. It came in the mail. Emily recognized the handwriting immediately. Daniel. She sat beside her daughter. You want me to read it? Lily nodded. Emily opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. No lawyers. No legal language. Just a father writing to his little girl. Dear Lily. I realized I've spent too much time trying to prove I was a good father instead of learning how to be one. If you'll let me, I'd like another chance. Love, Dad. Emily quietly folded the letter. Lily looked up. Is Daddy still mad? Emily smiled gently. No. I don't think he is anymore. Daniel kept his promise. He started showing up. Not with expensive presents. Not with promises. With time. He attended school concerts. Soccer games. Parent meetings. He learned the names of Lily's teachers. He finally discovered which stuffed unicorn she couldn't sleep without. And the first time Lily hugged him without being asked. He cried all the way back to his car. No one saw it. Except himself. Winter arrived. One snowy evening, the 4 of them decorated the Christmas tree together. Michael untangled lights. Emily pretended not to notice when he put every ornament in the wrong place. The girls laughed so hard they nearly fell off the couch. When the last ornament was finally hung, the room became quiet. Soft Christmas music played in the background. Snow drifted past the windows. Michael reached into his pocket. Emily looked at him curiously. He smiled nervously. This wasn't part of the plan. She laughed softly. I've noticed. He held out a small velvet box. Sophie and Lily already voted. Emily blinked. What? They've apparently been discussing this for weeks. The girls immediately covered their mouths, trying, and failing, not to laugh. Michael took one slow breath. The day we met. I thought I was helping someone survive one impossible night. He looked into Emily's eyes. I never imagined you'd become my favorite part of every morning afterward. Emily's eyes filled with tears. You once told me that you needed an address. He smiled. I was hoping you might stay for the rest of our story. He opened the box. Inside was a simple engagement ring. Nothing extravagant. Just beautiful. Just honest. Emily laughed through her tears. You know, I still think accepting a stranger's offer was the craziest decision I've ever made. Michael smiled. I know. She looked around. At Lily. At Sophie. At the home that had once belonged to strangers. Then back at him. It turned out to be the best one too. Is that a yes? Sophie shouted. Emily laughed. Yes. Before Michael could even stand. The girls tackled both of them in one enormous hug. Hot chocolate spilled onto the rug. The dog barked. Someone knocked an ornament off the tree. Nobody cared. Sometimes life changes because of years of careful planning. And sometimes everything changes because one person hears another person crying behind a closed door. And chooses to open it. Not because they're looking for anything. Not because they're expecting something in return. But simply because kindness still exists. And sometimes one open door becomes a home. If you were in Emily's place, would you have trusted a complete stranger? Or would you have walked away, convinced it was too risky? Be honest, I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. Because sometimes the hardest choice is believing that good people still exist.